It was the kind of night that made the world feel forgotten. Snow slammed against the windows like a warning, and the wind howled through the trees as if it carried a message no one wanted to hear. Inside a small cabin tucked deep in the woods, everything was still except her heartbeat. Laya gripped the fireplace poker tightly with both hands. Her eyes locked on the door. The knock had come out of nowhere, loud, urgent, and wrong. Nobody came out this far, not in weather like this. Then the voice. "Please," a man called out from beyond the door, his words muffled by snow and fear. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. My son is with me. He's sick. We need shelter, just for tonight." She didn't move. Her breath caught in her chest. Her hands trembled not from the cold, but from something deeper, a memory, a warning. She hissed back away from the door. Still, she didn't call for help. There was no signal out here, just silence and storm. Through the foggy glass, she saw two shapes. One tall, one small. The tall one hunched protectively over the smaller figure, shielding it from the wind. The snow danced violently around them, a cruel, blinding curtain. Then came the cough. The small body jolted in the man's arms, a sound that cut through everything. Harsh, wet, frightening. Laya's grip loosened. "I don't let strangers in," she muttered, half to herself, half to him. "Not anymore." "I know," the voice replied, quieter now, almost broken. "I wouldn't ask if I had a choice." For a long moment, nothing moved. Not the air, not the flame in the hearth, not even her. And then she turned the knob. The door groaned open. Cold air rushed in like a wave, slamming against her legs, stinging her skin through the wool socks. There they were. The man stood soaked, his hair stuck to his forehead, eyes hollow with exhaustion. In his arms, a boy, no more than 6, wrapped tight in his coat, trembling. Laya didn't speak. She didn't smile. She just stepped aside. "Thank you," he said. And in they came quietly, carefully, like ghosts looking for a place to rest. Some doors we lock forever. Some we open once and never close again. What would you do if a stranger asked for shelter in the heart of a storm? This story is just beginning. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing out the storm, but not the silence. Laya bolted it, then stood motionless, still clutching the fire poker. The man placed the child gently onto the old couch, unzipped his own soaked jacket, and wrapped it around the boy's small frame. "Sit by the fire," she said, coldly. "Don't touch anything else." He obeyed without hesitation, carefully, deliberately. His movements were quiet, almost reverent. He knelt beside the boy, who let out another rasping cough that made Laya wince despite herself. "What's your name?" she demanded. The man didn't look up. "David," he said. "And this is Eli. He's 6. He has a fever. Maybe the flu." "You think," her tone turned sharp, "you dragged a child into a blizzard. That's not flu, that's negligence." David swallowed hard, brushing damp strands of hair from Eli's forehead. "We didn't have another choice. His grandmother lives 2 towns over. We were driving there when the roads closed, got stuck. Then the engine died." Laya folded her arms, watching them from across the room. Her cabin wasn't large, just one main room and a small kitchen. But right now, it felt painfully full. Of tension, of questions, of memories she had fought to bury. It had been almost a year since she let someone in, a man with a soft voice and hungry eyes, who left her with nothing but a broken lock and a lesson she would never forget. "I have dry towels and instant soup," she said flatly. "That's it." "That's more than we could ask for," David murmured. She returned with the towels and handed them over without stepping too close. He thanked her again, quieter this time, and began drying the boy's face and hair with gentle hands. Laya watched, not the kind of watching that invites trust, the kind that remembers what trust can cost. The fire crackled. Eli stirred half asleep. His cheeks were flushed lips pale. When he whimpered softly, David leaned in and whispered something only a father would know how to say. And something in her chest shifted, just slightly. She turned back to the kitchen, pulled 2 mugs from the cupboard, and muttered under her breath, "Chicken noodle it is." A few minutes later, she returned with the soup. She handed the first mug to David and placed the second in the boy's hands. His fingers were tiny, trembling as he tried to hold it. David helped guide the spoon to his lips. Laya sat on the edge of the worn-out armchair, farthest from the fire, farthest from them, still watching, still calculating, still wondering if she had made the second biggest mistake of her life. The wind howled louder now, rattling the cabin walls. But inside, a new kind of quiet had settled. Not peace, not yet, but something that looked a little like grace. "You don't have to be afraid," David said suddenly, without looking at her. "I'm not afraid," she replied too quickly, too sharply. He smiled gently. "Then maybe you're braver than you think." She didn't answer, not with words at least. But her grip on the poker loosened, just a little. And somewhere between the soup, the firelight, and a child's soft breathing, something began to thaw. Not the storm outside, but the one inside her. Morning didn't come with sunlight, only with a softer gray, the kind that blurs time and makes you wonder if night ever ended at all. The storm had slowed, but not stopped. Snow still danced lazily in the air like it had nowhere else to go. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, but it was still alive, like them. Laya stood by the kitchen sink, pouring hot water into a chipped teapot. She didn't speak, but her eyes kept flicking back to the couch where David and Eli slept, tangled together beneath a blanket she hadn't planned to share. She had given it to him the night before, quietly, without comment. Just handed it over and walked away. It was her grandmother's quilt, the one she rarely touched. Now it covered a stranger's son. David stirred first. He sat up slowly, rubbed his face with both hands, and then checked Eli's forehead with the kind of care that didn't feel performative. It felt practiced. Lived. "He's still warm," David murmured. "I have ginger tea," Laya said softly. "With honey. It helps." David turned surprised by the tone, grateful. She brought him the tea and another for herself. They sat near the fire, cross-legged on the worn rug, careful not to wake the boy. For a while, neither spoke. Then David broke the silence. "She loved chicken noodle," he said, suddenly, eyes on the fireplace. "Who did? My wife. Eli's mother. She used to say soup could fix anything." He gave a dry laugh. "She made it every time he sneezed, thought it was magic." "What happened to her?" David stared at the flame. "Cancer. Fast. Brutal. I thought I was prepared. You never are." Laya's gaze softened. "She passed 3 winters ago. Since then, it's been just us. She nodded slowly. He's sweet, polite. I try. David whispered. He's all I've got. They fell quiet again, but it wasn't heavy this time. Just full, like the silence after a long truth has finally been spoken aloud. Laya stood and disappeared into the back room. She returned with a small, faded teddy bear, its fur thin one ear, lopsided. She placed it gently beside Eli's head. David blinked. What's that? My first friend, she said quietly. Figured he could use one. Eli didn't wake, but he curled slightly toward the bear, and Laya sat down again this time, a little closer to David. The rest of the day unfolded like something rehearsed in another life. David chopped firewood. Laya stirred a pot of real soup. She watched him from the kitchen window, each swing of the axe deliberate, focused. He worked like someone who knew what it meant to be cold before the storm ever came. Later, when the cabin sprung a leak near the back door, David fixed it with a screwdriver from her shed. He didn't ask. He just saw what needed doing and did it. She made biscuits. He taught Eli how to fold paper animals from napkins. Eli giggled when a moose collapsed mid-fold. Laya smiled before she could stop herself. Then, just before dusk, Eli pulled out a notebook she'd given him. He drew quietly for 10 minutes, tongue sticking out in concentration. When he finished, he handed it to Laya with both hands. This is you, he said proudly, opening the door. It was a picture of the cabin in the snow. A man and a boy stood outside. A woman stood in the doorway, golden light spilling behind her. She stared at it for a long time, then taped it to the wall above the fireplace. My second home, Eli declared. David looked at her, not with gratitude, but with something quieter, deeper. And for the first time, Laya looked back and didn't look away. By morning they were gone. No footprints in the fresh snow. No sounds. No note on the door. Just gone. Laya stood on her porch, wrapped in a thick coat heart pounding in a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. She had expected relief. What she felt was hollow. The cabin was clean, too clean. The dishes were washed. The blanket was folded neatly on the edge of the couch. The teddy bear sat quietly where Eli had left it, arms open. The drawing above the fireplace was still there. That's when she saw it. A small envelope sat on the kitchen table, cream-colored, folded with care, no name on the outside. She approached it slowly, her breath catching. Inside a note. Thank you for the warmth, for the kindness, for reminding me that people like you still exist. I won't forget this night. You helped more than you know. No signature. But beside the letter was something she couldn't explain. A card. Heavy, sleek, black. No name, no logo. Just a single chip and a strip of numbers. Laya had never held one before, but she had heard about them. Black cards, the kind reserved for the ultra-wealthy. People who don't ask for shelter, they buy it. Her breath hitched. No. She clutched the card to her chest, her pulse pounding. What kind of man gives a woman his black card and walks away without a word? She didn't touch the money. She couldn't. But she had to know. The next day, she walked into the only bank in town, heart racing, as she stepped up to the teller. I found this, she said, voice barely steady. Can you tell me anything about it? The teller took it, eyebrows lifting slightly as she typed in the numbers. Then a pause, a flicker in her expression. "I can't tell you much," the woman said carefully. "This is a private high-tier account, no name attached publicly, but whoever gave you this trusts you more than most people trust their own family." Laya's hands trembled. "I'm not here to use it," she whispered. I needed to know." The teller nodded gently and slid the card back. Laya returned to her cabin, closed the door, and cried. Not because she'd been abandoned, not because he had lied, but because for the first time in years, someone had seen her, trusted her, not with words, not with apologies, but with something bigger than money, belief. She placed the card in a drawer, far in the back beneath old notebooks and tea towels, untouched, unspent, but never ever forgotten. The storm outside had passed, but inside something had begun to stir. Not pain, not loss, but a question that would haunt her in every quiet moment. Who was he really? And why did it feel like her story with him was only just beginning? The weeks blurred together. Snow melted slowly. The days grew longer. But inside, Laya still felt the absence like a pulse. She went back to work at the diner, took extra shifts, tried to forget the way Eli's drawing still clung to her wall like a memory that refused to fade. Then the letter came. Thick cream envelope. Her name written in ink that looked deliberate. Inside was a single page. Dear Miss Laya Thompson, we are pleased to invite you to a private interview for the newly formed community outreach program within RN Holdings. Your name was personally recommended. Travel arrangements have been made. Sincerely, David R., Chief Executive Officer, RN Holdings. Her hands trembled. She read it again. And again. David, he found me. 3 days later, she stood in the marble lobby of a glass tower she never thought she'd step into. Her boots were still dusted with mountain dirt. Her scarf a little frayed, but her back was straight. 32nd floor, the receptionist said. Mr. Rivera will meet you personally. Mr. Rivera. Laya blinked. He's the CEO. The woman smiled. Yes. He said you'd be coming. In the elevator, Laya's heart thundered like it was trying to get out. She thought of Eli's cough, the soup, the fire. The moment she turned the knob and opened a door that changed everything. The doors slid open. David stood near the window, silhouetted against a city skyline that shimmered like something out of a dream. He turned slowly. Same eyes, same quiet presence. But now in a charcoal suit. Laya, he said, and for a moment the world stopped. She stepped forward, voice soft. David. He smiled. Warm, steady, familiar. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. You invited me. I hoped you'd say yes. They sat in a small seating area near the window. He handed her a folder. Inside, carefully pressed, was Eli's drawing. The cabin, the storm, the golden light spilling out of an open door. You kept it, she whispered. I took it, he said gently. That morning, Eli called you our angel. He wanted me to keep it close. She looked at him. The man who had once slept on her couch feeding his son with trembling hands, now sitting before her as the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm. I didn't tell you who I was, he continued. That night. I wasn't a CEO. I was just a father. Desperate. Grateful. She didn't interrupt. I've spent every day since trying to figure out how to repay a kindness that can't be bought. He paused. But then I realized, maybe it shouldn't be repaid. Maybe it should be built on. He handed her a second folder, this one heavier. Inside documents, charts, plans. The Open Door Initiative, he said. Shelters, childcare, jobs, education. For families like mine, for women like you. And she asked softly, I want you to lead it. She blinked. Me? He nodded. You lived it. You are it. You opened a door for two strangers without asking for anything. That's the kind of leadership the world needs. Laya looked down at the proposal. Her fingers brushed the edge of Eli's drawing again. This isn't about money, is it? No, David said, voice firm. It never was. She looked back at him, eyes shining now, not from shock, but from something deeper. Trust. Hope. I'll do it, she said, not because of the title, not because of the office, but because for the first time she saw in David's eyes something she hadn't seen in her own reflection for years. The weeks that followed moved with quiet purpose. Laya and David, once strangers bound by a storm, now stood side by side, building something that had never existed before. The Open Door Initiative became more than a name. It became a movement. Together, they opened shelters in rural towns, launched job training for single parents, created safe havens for children like Eli and women like Laya, people forgotten in the corners of the world. She was the heart, he was the structure. And in between them, trust fierce debate and a kind of unspoken rhythm that only comes when two people have truly seen each other at their most vulnerable. He brought her coffee every morning. 2 sugars, no cream. Cinnamon sprinkled on top. She never asked how he remembered. Some nights they worked late elbows brushing over spreadsheets. Other nights he walked her to her car in silence, their steps falling in sync under the city lights. No promises, no labels, just presence. Then came the gala, the biggest event of the year. Laya stood on stage in a simple navy dress, hands trembling slightly as she told the story, not of a CEO, not of a program, but of a night in the mountains. A knock on the door and a boy with a fever. She didn't name David. She didn't have to. But when she stepped off stage, a reporter approached, voice sharp like polished glass. Some say your rise in RN Holdings is due to personal ties with Mr. Rivera. Can you confirm that? The question hit like a slap. Laya froze, then a voice behind her. If I may, David said, stepping beside her. Calm, certain. He placed his hand gently on her back, steadying, not claiming. The woman standing beside me, he said to the crowd, changed my life. When I had nothing, no power, no name, no plan, she gave me, and my son, warmth, safety, dignity, without asking who I was, without needing anything in return. He looked at her then, and everyone could see it. This company, this program, everything we've done, it was born because she opened her door. Silence fell. Then applause, slow, growing real. That night, when the lights dimmed and the guests left, they stood alone in the center of the empty ballroom. You didn't have to say all that, Laya whispered. David smiled softly. Yes, I did. And this time, he didn't let go of her hand. Winter returned gently that year. Snow fell like memory, soft, slow, sacred. David had invited Laya and Eli to spend the weekend away from the city. She hadn't known where they were going until the final turn in the road. Her breath caught. The cabin. Restored. Quiet. Still nestled in the woods like it had been waiting all this time. Inside, the same fire crackled. The same quilt lay folded on the couch. Above the mantel, framed in glass, hung Eli's drawing. "You kept it," she whispered. David nodded. It was the first place he called home again. Later that night, after dinner and stories, Eli fell asleep beneath the quilt teddy bear in his arms. Laya stepped out onto the porch watching the snowfall. David joined her. After a long pause, he reached into his coat, pulled out a small velvet box, and knelt, not in a grand ballroom, but on the very spot where she once opened a door to him. He held out a simple silver ring. Inside the band, 6 words etched. "Thank you for opening the door. I used to believe I didn't deserve a family," he said softly. "But you made room for one." He looked up at her eyes, full, not of certainty, but of courage. "I can't promise perfection, but I promise this: my door will always be open to you, to Eli, to whatever we build together." A small sound broke the silence. Miss Laya Eli stood sleepily in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "You made Dad smile like that first night." Laya laughed, through tears, knelt down beside David, and wrapped her arms around them both. The snow kept falling, but the door never closed again. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness matters, that love sometimes knocks softly in the middle of a storm, then share it. Let someone else remember that hope can arrive in the quietest ways, one open door at a time. Subscribe to soul-stirring stories. Let your heart be reminded. One story at a time.